All right, let's dive into a really fascinating paradox that's going on right at the heart of Ethereum. You see, to fix a problem that was basically crippling the network, its developers rolled out an upgrade. An upgrade so successful, it's now threatening to undermine the whole system's value. So how did a brilliant solution end up creating an even bigger, more complicated problem? Let's break it all down.
This whole situation was just perfectly captured in a Reddit discussion. A user named Notorious544D put it this way: people complained when ETH fees were too high, people are complaining that ETH fees are too low. It sounds completely nuts, right? It's like a classic damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario.
But what if both of those statements are actually true? To really get our heads around how both high fees and low fees can be a huge problem, we got to rewind a little bit, back to a fundamental challenge that's literally baked into Ethereum's design.
And that brings us to our first big idea: Ethereum's long battle with a problem that honestly plagues almost every single blockchain out there. It's known as the scalability trilemma.
You see, Ethereum got wildly successful. It's the foundation for over 70% of the entire world of decentralized finance, or DeFi. We're talking lending, trading, all that stuff without a bank. But its own incredible popularity created a total nightmare. The network basically became a one-lane road with a million cars all trying to use it at the same time. Complete and utter gridlock.
And that gridlock, it had a very real cost. During the crypto market peak back in 2021, the average fee for just one transaction, it shot up to over $50. I mean, can you imagine paying $50 just to use an app on your phone? It made the network completely unusable for almost everybody. This wasn't just some minor bug. This was an existential threat. And the reason for this mess is rooted in this core concept, which was actually coined by Ethereum's own founder, Vitalik Buterin. It's called the scalability trilemma. And the theory is pretty simple. A blockchain can only ever have two of these three critical things: scalability, which means speed and low cost; security, and decentralization. You can pick any two, but you always have to sacrifice the third.
So this kind of lays out the impossible choice they had to make. And as you can see, right there in that first row, Ethereum chose security and decentralization. But the cost of that choice was giving up scalability. That one decision is exactly why the network got so slow and so expensive. They basically chose to be a fortress, not a freeway. So how in the world do you solve an impossible trilemma? Well, you don't break the rules. You kind of build on top of them. And this brings us to the really clever solution the community came up with, a new technology known as Layer 2s.
Okay, let's go back to that traffic jam analogy. If the main Ethereum network, that's Layer 1, is that gridlocked single-lane highway, then Layer 2s, or L2s, are like brand new, high-speed express lanes built right over the top of it. They're specifically designed to pull traffic off that main road and move it way faster. Now, the most popular kind of L2 is called a rollup. And the process is actually pretty brilliant. First, it bundles hundreds of transactions together off-chain, in that fast express lane, away from all the congestion. Then, it just posts a tiny, compressed summary of all that activity back down to the main chain. It's the best of both worlds. You get the cheap speed of an express lane, but you inherit the ironclad security of the main highway. And the big question? Did it work? Oh yeah, absolutely. For the average person, just moving their activity over to a Layer 2 network cut their costs by over 90%. Those $50 fees? Gone, vanished, replaced by transactions that cost just a few cents. It really seemed like this scalability problem was, finally solved. And this wasn't just one single project either. A whole ecosystem just exploded into existence. You've got solutions like Arbitrum and Optimism, and they all use slightly different versions of this roll-up tech. They're all competing to offer the fastest, cheapest experience, but they all still rely on the security of that main Ethereum chain. But this is where the story takes a sharp turn. The very solution that saved Ethereum from being ridiculously expensive has now sparked this brand new fear. Are L2s actually killing the very network they were built to save? So let's jump back to that Reddit thread. Here's the core of the anxious argument, from a user named Revathy. They argue that as more and more people move to these cheap L2s, the main Ethereum network gets less and less revenue from fees. So, even though the network's overall use is growing, the value of its token, ETH, could actually go down. And here's what that fear looks like, visually. The bar on the left, that shows the high revenue the main network used to pull in.
But now, with L2s, the main chain gets just a tiny fraction of that for providing security. It really looks like the L2s are capturing all the value, while the main layer 1 that makes everything possible is kind of being starved.
And this all leads to the absolute nightmare scenario for Ethereum supporters. What if a layer 2 gets so huge, so successful, that it decides it doesn't even need Ethereum security anymore? It could just detach, become its own independent blockchain, and take millions of users and billions of dollars in value with it, just leaving Ethereum in the dust.
Okay, that is a scary thought. But what if that fear is completely and totally misplaced? Let's look at the powerful counter-argument, that this isn't a bug at all, but a feature of a very calculated, very long-term bet on Ethereum's future.
So another user in that same thread, P7X1, offers this totally different way of looking at it. They argue, look, this isn't a bug, it's a feature. Ethereum is intentionally making its services insanely cheap through these L2s to do one thing and one thing only: drive mass adoption. It's a classic business strategy, right? You slash your prices to grow your user base.
And you know what? The hard numbers seem to back this up. Even with these rock-bottom fees today, Ethereum still generated $2.6 billion in revenue last year. That is double what Bitcoin made, and almost 9 times its competitor, Solana. And look at that burned column. A huge chunk of Ethereum's fees are actually permanently removed from circulation, which makes the remaining ETH more scarce. Its economic engine isn't just running, it's an absolute powerhouse.
And this is a huge part of the long-term bet. The super low fees right now are seen as a temporary thing, a feature of a market that's still young. As these L2s grow and start competing more fiercely for space on the main chain, experts predict Ethereum will naturally start capturing somewhere between 50 to 60% of all the revenue from L2s. The strategy is to first grow a massive, massive pie, and then take your slice. And that fear of L2s just up and leaving, well, that kind of overlooks Ethereum's incredible gravitational pull. It provides the two things that no layer 2 can easily replicate on its own: rock-solid security and deep liquidity. That's the giant pool of money that makes all of DeFi work. With over 70% of all value locked into its ecosystem, an L2 abandoning Ethereum would be like a major city deciding to secede from the country that provides its military and its currency. It's just a fundamentally risky, maybe even impossible move.
So, the paradox starts to become a little clearer. What looks like a revenue drain today could actually be a strategic investment in total dominance tomorrow. But this whole high-stakes bet is happening in a space that still has enormous challenges to overcome. So let's zoom out and see what the road ahead looks like.
Because, let's be honest, the entire Web3 world is still facing these massive hurdles. First, security is a constant war. We've seen hacks on the bridges connecting these networks cost people hundreds of millions of dollars. Second, the regulatory stuff is a total minefield of uncertainty. And finally, for most people, using this technology is still way too complicated.
And this all leaves us with the ultimate question. Ethereum is betting its entire future on this complex, layered vision. Is it building a strong, sturdy bridge to the mainstream that billions of people will one day cross? Or is it just building a more intricate, more complex house of cards, just waiting for a strong gust of wind? The answer to that question is probably going to define the entire future of the decentralized internet.